Welcome to Thoroughly Wrong, and now your hosts, Francisco and Robert. Take it away, guys. All right, welcome to the Thoroughly Wrong Project with Francisco and Robert. It's a beautiful Saturday morning, early in the morning. I don't think we've ever recorded this early, so I'm not awake yet. And like I was talking before, I haven't had my coffee yet, and that doesn't come till after the podcast. So if I'm a little grouchy, shit happens. Today we have a guest, Kat. We're going to talk about a really serious problem in America and close to all of our hearts because we all work in the industry. I hate to call it an industry, but it is homelessness. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. How are you guys doing this morning?
Pretty good.
Excellent. You like this early mornings?
Well, I don't really drink coffee or anything, so.
You don't drink coffee?
No, it does. I feel like it doesn't do much for me. Like energy drinks, coffee, I feel the same, so I kind of just don't.
Oh, I don't do energy drinks. No, thank you.
The only thing that's ever that I know worked for me to keep me awake when I needed to stay awake were those little 5-hour energy shots. Because I was driving through the Grapevine at 2-3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I was I need to pull over because I'm so tired. And then I took one and I was wired.
Yeah, wired till Thursday, right? It's
yeah.
Damn.
But that's only rare occasions. So other than that, I just wake myself up just by doing whatever I need to be doing.
Right on, man. I know Kat drinks coffee.
I definitely do. I had 1 cup this morning already at about maybe 7 a.m.
Up early this morning.
That's my usual status. So.
Yeah, when I was a truck driver, I used to stop at Sheetz or can't remember the name of the truck stop, but I used to get a cup of coffee and drop a 5-hour energy in it and then drive.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, it's like your hair is sticking straight up. So whenever you see one of those truck drivers up there with his eyes pegged, that's what it is. It's 5-hour energy.
Mixed in with the coffee.
He's only been driving for about 2 days, so stay out of his way. Well, I don't know if anybody knows. We haven't really talked about it, Lalo, but Lalo and I and Kat all work for Kern County as homeless adult team. Shout out to BHRS. I've been here for about a year, and this program has morphed 3 times since I've been here, and I've been in 3 different programs. And the one that's coming up, the one I'm in now, currently, Rome, which I don't know what that acronym stands for. Do you, Kat?
No, don't know. I mean, I carry it around with me, but not that I'm aware of. Not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's we're in the Rome program. What is that? Well, it's something to do with the homeless. That's that's what we do.
I'm guessing the O is outreach. Maybe the E is engagement. Other than that.
Yeah, it's it's relation outreach engagement model. I think that's what it's.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
Relational outreach engagement model.
Okay, and we've needed it for quite a long time because in the 11, 12 months. Well, even before this has only been going on for about a month, but before that, it was very cut and dry. It was hello, homeless person. Do you need services? Do you need mental health services? There was nothing else that we offered. So now this engagement is more hey, how you doing? What's your name? If they want to give it or not, that's fine. But we ask them what they need rather than, what services we offer right away to overwhelm them. And I like this a lot better.
Yeah, I think that approach is a lot better even for them instead of us telling them. Because, I feel like if we explain to them, this is what we offer, this is what we do, they're going to be in their minds, oh, I don't know if that really pertains to me. If that's something I need. But when we ask them, what do you need? like, what are you struggling with? And they tell us, and then we can take that information and then see if we have something that can help with those certain issues. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a lot easier to get the ball rolling, you know?
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. When we're a mental health team, when we were, it seemed like we were strictly a mental health team. Whenever we didn't, they didn't need services, we were just kind of like, well, okay. And but now we can hand them off to a different team. I don't need mental health services. Yeah, but do you need a sleeping bag? Do you need shoes? You need some food, some water, a hygiene kit, something. And then we can get to know these people, and then we can hand them off to a team that suits their needs.
I
Yeah.
think that's something that we've always wanted to do, is to engage with people without an agenda, and
Right.
what we've tried to do. But now that we have, the okay to do that without the pressure of um, providing mental health services right off the bat, is definitely something I think people appreciate, because when you're randomly walking up to people and asking them if they have mental health issues, or, what's your trauma? And I don't think I know anyone who likes to be asked those questions right up front.
Yeah. Well, my trauma
So,
is that you're asking me about my trauma. That's fucking with me. So stop. Yeah. They don't have a lot of trust
yeah.
because the system has failed them repeatedly. And, I'm sure that they've been promised things that haven't
Mhm.
happened. And sometimes it's their fault. We're going to say that right off the bat. Sometimes people are homeless because it's their fault, and they don't get services because it's their fault. But most
Mhm.
of the time, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's just our culture's failed these people in some way or
Mhm.
another.
Yeah.
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 And even mental health, like even now, I feel like it's gotten a lot better, but I still think it's kind of a taboo thing to talk about, you know? People don't
Yeah.
really like to talk about that, especially, to some strangers pulling up in a van. Uh, you
It
kind
doesn't say
of,
it doesn't say naps and candy on the side though, so it's cool.
it's very hard for somebody to kind of admit to themselves, like, yeah, I have mental health issues. Um, I think that's just in general a very hard thing to kind of come to grips with and accept for yourself.
Mm.
And then on top of that, you have to not only accept it, but then want to get help or want to get better, you know?
Yeah, not only want to, Lalo, you have to figure out how to get it, because when a culture doesn't discuss it, then it becomes a problem where I don't have access. And if I don't have access, then all I do is say I don't have a problem, because what else am I going to do?
Yeah. I think that one of the important things to mention is that between 1955 and 1994, there were about 400, and so basically about 500,000 patients were discharged from the state hospitals. So when a lot of the hospitals closed, there's about 70,000 beds available nationwide, which means that about, half of the population who is currently homeless, they should, or theoretically would have been provided hospitalization between 1955 and 1994, but those beds aren't available anymore, so a lot of them are just roaming the streets.
Yeah. What
Mm.
happened? I mean, they
You
cut funding for it, or
there is just a sorry,
sorry.
deinstitutionalization. So
Ooh, that's a
uh,
13 syllable word.
de- deinst- a lot of the service were, I think in the past years, and even in terms of criminal justice reform, the plan has been to deinstitutionalize a lot of the services. So I think that's one of the, unintended consequences of deinstitutionalization, is if you don't have a solid plan, a lot of people fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I lived when that happened in 94, I lived in West Virginia, and I worked in the state hospital, which had,
mm,
I'm going to guess, roughly 1,000 people in it. It was a
mhm,
big one. It was huge. It's actually the largest hand cut stone building in America.
mhm,
And it's this beautiful castle looking thing. Well, there were hundreds of people in there, and the fence around the place, and people stood outside all day long, and it was just this fixture in town where, I'm not being facetious, but that's where the crazy people were, and it was a institution in a town. It was where everybody worked. In '94, they shut it down. They took about roughly 100 and put them in a new facility on top of a hill. That was the ones who could not take care of themselves. They were dangerous. They were, so mentally ill that they couldn't function in society. And they actually took people in busloads to like Charleston, West Virginia and Parkersburg and just let them go. So suddenly, you have how many people who are just suddenly without care walking the streets. It was a disaster. I lost my job because that's where I worked. I went into auto parts after that,
Mhm.
but it was just always been in my heart that I could not believe that, suddenly there's people standing on the corner and sleeping in the alleys in a small town of 1,500. So what an issue it became all of a sudden, just like that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's you always hear that like on the news, like, oh, California is like rampant with like, a homeless issue, a homeless population
Right.
issue. And you hear that all these states, like all these like democratic blue states, oh, like, you know, you guys have like a bunch of homeless people. Like, what kind of, how are you running your government where, that's one of your biggest issues. But the more you think about it, like a lot of homeless people tend to gravitate to these places because these are the places that offer the most services to them,
Right.
I
Right.
have some family
Larger
that they live
cities.
in near Prescott in Arizona, and there's like I was there for a few weeks and I didn't see a single homeless person, and that's something I brought up to them. That was a few years ago, and they told me like it's very hard to be a homeless person here. Like the cops will kick you out. Like they'll do those things where they put the handrails in between the
Hmm.
benches so people can't sleep
Right.
on them.
Wow.
They'll all these little tactics here and there that make it very hard to be a homeless person there, and they have no other choice but to leave the area.
Right.
Right.
They'll trespass, they'll get them for trespassing, throw them in jail, and then or like you said, they'll bust them and ship them somewhere else. That's literally what some places do. um, so I think that's something we really need to like look at and take care of.
Right. Robert and I believe, I don't know if Robert did, but I participated in the homeless count in Bakersfield last year, and the consensus was that a lot of the folks who are homeless in Bakersfield were actually born here. Um, so I think the common notion amongst community members is that they're bussed in from somewhere else, but a part of I think being a responsible community member is also saying that, well, a lot of these people, they were born and raised in Bakersfield and they're from here.
Right.
I think to think of it as sort of a myth that this is a problem that was somewhere else and it came here, and that's to the community member, I think is not taking responsibility uh, for our city. So that's what I would like to see more of is Bakersfield taking more ownership of the problems that are here in terms of homelessness, housing, and providing affordable rent, low subsidized or subsidized housing for low-income families. And as far as the cost of housing in California, the average cost of rent here is about $1,400.
Yeah.
So if you're making minimum wage, that's just not affordable, especially if you have children. Um,
Well, the new stimulus bill, 1.9 trillion, has a plan in it to raise the federal minimum wage from 7.25 to $15
right.
over 20 the next, what, 4 years? It's
Yes.
Yeah.
2025. Yeah, but the problem is, as the wages go up, is the
Hmm.
rent going to go up? That's the thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's like what Kat was saying, how you kind of have to combine the two of not only raising the minimum wage or raising the financial freedom people are able to have, but also providing these subsidized low income housing
Right.
and being able to give them that opportunity to kind of begin to dig themselves out of the hole that they're in.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, it's getting deeper and deeper, and there's really no end in sight. So I think
Yes.
we need a combination of programs and assistance. Not just one single thing's going to fix everything, you know?
Oh my God, you
Right.
fucking liberal.
I mean, if we want to look at it that way, I think that the problem would not be, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. The problem is that people love to make a profit off of their investment. So, landlords theoretically could decide to keep rent the same, but if your main income source is being a homeowner who rents housing, you want to keep your same profit, so you're going to increase the cost of rent.
Right.
That's unfortunately the way that it is. They could very much so keep the same rent price and raise the minimum wage, and the world would be a better place. But that's just not the world we live in.
Yeah, like
Exactly.
that's one of when it comes to like something like universal basic income, that's a lot of questions that people ask because they say, well, if you give $1,000 a month into everybody's hands, don't you think
Mhm.
their landlords are gonna be like, oh, well, you got an extra $1,000 every month. I'm
Right,
gonna bump up the rent, a few $100.
and they will,
Um, so
Unless there's a rent control law
unless
to
there is a rent
exactly, that's what I'm
control
saying.
law.
Like
Right.
that's what we need. Like we need multiple policies. For homeless people, first of all, we need to get them off the streets. We need to get them in stable housing because I mean, I feel like that alone does like tremendous help on your mental health. You're seeing yourself on a path to getting better. You're seeing progress in your life, and I think that
Right.
really helps you internally. And then from there, stabilize the housing. Job training, job assistance. Some simple things like helping them build a resume, and then from there, kind of just up and up and up.
yeah.
So it's
Well, I'm
definitely a
actually
progress.
reading an article here that from I don't know how credible the source is, but CureBed Los Angeles says that as of January 1st, California has enacted a statewide rent control for the first time. There is a limit on rent hikes, so landlords cannot raise rent more than 5% plus the local rate of inflation in a year. Um,
That's a great thing.
yeah.
Now,
Especially here in California.
yeah, see, that's a treating the problem.
Mhm.
But the problem is Americans, especially Americans, we have this idea that if we treat the symptom,
Mhm.
that then it'll be fine. But if we go back and solve the fucking problem and people, oh my God, it makes me so angry when people talk about the homeless, not just because that's my job, but because it's my heart
Mhm.
that I have for these people. And they talk about the homeless like they're the problem. And I always tell them, you know what? The homeless people aren't the fucking problem. Homelessness is the problem. And
Right.
that's the source of what we have to treat. And like Lalo said, you've got to get them in housing first. And that's the beauty of this Rome program now, instead of, okay, I got to get you some treatment. I got to get you X, Y, and Z, and then I'll get you in a house. And we flipped it backwards now. Let's get you in housing, and then we can get you X, Y, Z in treatment. That's the beautiful part of this new program. That I love it, man.
Yeah, because I mean, for a lot of these people, um, it's kind of hard to focus on treatment and therapy, things like that when you're kind of worried like, oh, where am I going to sleep tonight? Where
Yeah,
am I going to find food? Where am I going to get some water? Like that kind of takes the forefront. Like surviving for them is probably one of their main concerns on a daily basis.
it's hard to work on your anxiety when it's caused by your homelessness.
Exactly.
I'm uh I'm hopeful now. I really am. I have but you know what? They're not just the mentally ill, not just the ones that have fallen through the cracks. We're start Kat, you can tell me if you see this too. I see a lot of people who don't want off the street now. They just say, I've been away from people for so long and I'm happy out here. I don't want to go inside. And I don't know if that's
Mm.
the truth or if that's really the situation in their minds.
I think it goes both ways. People, uh, I've observed that people they've become accustomed to living on the streets where they can come and go as they please. They're free to come in and out. And if they're placed in some of these shelters, they don't have the option to do that. There's rules, there's regulations. Yeah, they can't. I'll just say it. A lot of you know, the people who are homeless, they struggle with substance use,
Yeah.
and they tend to become, attached to the area of town that they frequent because it's close to where they can use, and um, they develop some of these survival tactics and techniques to where they can make it in that community closest to where some of the other homeless people can support them. So I do sometimes see that they don't want housing in terms of shelters, but they are eager to have some form of housing. I don't think that anyone really wants to, know what it feels like to go days on end or weeks on end without showering or a place to use the bathroom. I don't think that that's part of what people want to do, but I do think that, through trauma or years of living on the streets, that it's something that becomes normalized to them. And
So you think it's
it's up
just
to us to,
acceptance?
yeah, they've accepted where they are, and I'd like to think that they've made attempts in their early years to get off the streets to, live quote unquote normally. Um, but part of it, I think, is just they've become accustomed to living that way, and any habit is hard to break. But when it's a habit of lifestyle, I think that's more so than some of the other things. And it's not a crime for them to live on the streets. I think that as a society, community, we've made it a crime for people to be homeless. And it's not a crime for them to be homeless. It's,
Right.
to live outside of walls or to live inside of walls is a social construct. It's it's more so of they're an inconvenience to business owners, cause public health issues with homelessness without access to showers or bathrooms, or if they're frequenting places where there's business, that causes a problem for business owners. There's a real issue with hepatitis, HIV, AIDS amongst the homeless population, and um, part of, I think, addressing homelessness is becoming aware of the fact that it is a public health issue without taking away from people's humanity when you're offering them services or trying to address their problem.
There there are so many. You mentioned the substance abuse, and not only that, we're looking at 20, like I think it was 20 to 25% of these people are mentally ill. And then you've got family violence
Mhm.
problems, physical health issues, loss of employment. I can't find a place to live, limited housing, drug and alcohol addiction. And some of that addiction happens after they become homeless. So when,
Mhm.
and then we've got traumatic experiences, which almost happened to me after my car accident in 99. I moved here from West Virginia in July of 99. And in August, that kid hit me going over 100 miles an hour. Well, here I am in California. I'm 2,400 miles away from home. And all of a sudden, I don't have a car. I'm in a wheelchair. My son is dead. So you got this whole thing going on. I had no one. And if I hadn't had a neighbor, and I can't even remember the guy's name anymore, but the dude knocked on my door and he offered to go grocery shopping for me, and he offered to help me get my laundry down there. And he was just this kind-hearted person. If it hadn't been for that dude, I would have
Mhm.
been on the street, just that simple, because I had nowhere to go. I had nowhere to go and no help. So when shit like that happens to people, and then they end up on the street, and then they end up on drugs, and someone comes by and says, of course you're homeless, you're a fucking drug addict. I get so angry. I'm like, do you
Mhm.
understand what could have taken these people to the streets? We
Right.
have got to be more empathetic because it
Right.
could be us. The next one, you're up to bat, kid. You're going in the street. What are you going to do?
Yeah, and I think
Right.
this whole pandemic situation has really, I mean, not for everyone, obviously, but for a lot of people, it's kind of shown them that things could change like overnight, and you could find yourself, without a job, without stable income for you and your family, and it's really shown people like it really can like happen to anybody, and I'm sure it has happened to a lot of people. I'm sure there's hundreds if not thousands of people that have become homeless in the past year because of this whole COVID situation.
Yeah.
So, you know the progress that I think or I felt we were making in the past few years, I think kind of just with the whole pandemic it might have taken a few steps back, just because not just for the people that are living that lose their job and become homeless or are affected by it, but even by people like us or departments like us that we have to change our way of providing services. Early on there was nobody coming into work, everything was over the phone. It's kind of hard to really it's kind of hard to do outreach when you're not doing outreach, you're not going out there and
Yeah.
interacting with these
Yeah.
people. So, I think we're really on the way back, like we're on the come up
Well,
when it comes to that. But I think it's going to take a little bit more time.
I think one of the good things about the whole COVID situation, though, it being in a pandemic, is that it's shown us that, enacting these, moratoriums on evictions has made it so that some families are able to keep their homes. Where that could have maybe who knows, those families could have ended up homeless during this time, but because of COVID, that moratorium's been placed on eviction, so those families are not homeless, and it's shown us that it's possible, as a nation to not have evictions.
Right. Right. That has there there's just a that one simple problem with it. Once the moratorium is over,
Right.
what's the law say here? Because
Yeah.
suddenly the landlord has $10,000 that he needs to pay the bank in order to keep
Right.
the house that he has. And if he loses the house, then the people in the house may lose their housing. So
Yeah.
it's just this domino effect. It's like, yep, you don't have to pay right now. And then
Yeah.
the owners are saying, well, when do they have to pay? Or do
Right.
they have to pay? And if they don't, do I have to pay?
Yeah.
So it's billions and trillions of dollars are being held up right now. And what a fucking mess, really. What a mess. When the moratorium ends, it's like, I think you and I and Francis going to be really busy.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even for like mortgages, there was a lot of companies that were putting pause on mortgage payments.
Yep.
I
Yes.
imagine for a lot of these landlords, they were able to do the same.
We
Because
hope.
they don't, if they're not getting rent, I don't think they're going to try to want to either pay out of pocket or fall back on their mortgage. So I'm pretty sure they also put a pause on their mortgage payments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of, the 36 months that you owed on the loan, you missed 12 months, you still owe 36 months now. It just you got an
Yeah.
extension. We
Yeah,
hope.
they just tack it
Yeah.
on at the end um, of your
But I
mortgage.
don't think that's going to be 100% of the time
No,
because
yeah, I think that just went based on whether the like lending company was willing to do that.
Really.
But I heard most of them were, so
that's a
we'll see.
great thing.
I mean, most of these companies have some form of insurance that could cover those, in the event that people default on their loans or are not able to pay them. So I'm sure they have some form of, protection and as a business.
Yeah, and also I don't think, I mean, during regular normal pre-COVID time, if you like foreclose or default on your loan, like it wasn't as big of an impact if half your loans do go on default,
Hmm.
because half the people can't pay it. So I think they're trying to be smart about it and trying to protect themselves against so many like bankruptcies or foreclosures all at one time.
Hmm.
So I think forgiving or putting a pause on some of those payments not only helps them but also the people that are living in these homes.
This thing, I hate to say, the good thing about the pandemic, but there are some great things that have happened to our culture, and lots of people have died, and lots of people are sick, and lots of companies are gone out of business, and restaurants. And I know we always dwell on all the bad shit that's happening in the news, but you know what? Kat was right. When this happened, it kind of woke us up to the fact that, hey, we can operate on a different level here. We can stop the payments and nobody dies. We can stop the payment and nobody goes broke. We can be more empathetic. We can reach out more. And people are so hungry for, to talk to each other now and to hug each other. And everybody's like, when I get the shot, things are going to be better and different, and I'm going to live my life different. And that's what a lot of trauma does to us. If I live through this, I'm going to be a better person. That's a beautiful thing. So as far as I'm not glad it happened, but it does take trauma to and real hardship to change people sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe we'll be a better culture.
Yeah, and like I said, I think we're on the rebound, especially with the vaccine rolling out, um, across the world and across the country.
Oh, I got my second one. Oh my God.
So I think we're just kind of counting down the days till we're back to a sense of normality, which I think we will get to sooner rather than later at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we're on the downside. I hope. Have you guys got a shot yet?
No, I still need to make
No.
my appointment. I need my insurance card because I don't have one.
You still haven't done that? Yeah, things are going to be better, Francisco, as soon as people get their fucking insurance card and get their goddamn shot.
I like always forget because I need to get the number from the website, and then I always tell myself, "Oh, I'll get it at work" because we have the website at work.
I
And then
want you to soak your mask in vinegar, and then that way, every time you put it on, it will remind you to get your insurance card.
and they're rolling out the vaccine to a lot more like different industries. Like all the school teachers are getting it. There's farm workers getting it, which I think was very important because I
Yeah,
mean I don't think farm workers ever really stopped working. You can't like they never stopped doing that, because we all have food on our tables. So obviously,
right.
I think they get very overlooked most of the time.
It was on KGTV on the news last night that the food workers and teachers. So it appears that we've gone to that tier B.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I know a lot of school districts are planning to go back in March, back to in person.
Yeah,
Yeah, it got
So
extended to April.
my wife's going back right after spring break. She teaches eighth grade English, so things are looking up. But back to the question at hand: when will the homeless people? When are they going to get lined up for it, and for the ones that want it?
There is an option at the shelters. I know they were had a list to sign up because they're part of this group of people who's living in the congregated area and in large groups where COVID's known to spread. So they can sign up, they can get it if you work in a shelter. They were definitely provided with the option to. I'm not sure how many of them signed up, but with some of the outbreaks that happen at these shelters, I think it's definitely necessary for them too, for their own safety.
Yeah,
Um,
they should. I mean,
but they're, it's completely optional, voluntary. There's not any pressure for them to do. to not if they don't want to. So,
Well, when you're transient and there's 2 weeks between the shots, that creates an instant problem.
right.
So the problem rolls on, I guess. I think things are looking up for our industry, and I again hate to call it an industry because it sounds so capitalistic, because we're not trying to make money off these people, I don't think. But the issue is it's not an industry as much as it's an outreach, it's help, you know.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, like you guys were saying earlier, um, it's gonna take a lot of different policies from that attack different problems, because like you said, homelessness is not just like a single issue. Like there's a lot of causes of homelessness,
Yeah.
so you have to fix those little problems that cause homelessness to, at the end of the day, stop that major the big picture of homelessness.
I will
Let's fix.
add one of, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I will add that one of the areas that I would love to see improvement in terms of the county or nation, whichever you choose, is the issue with the number of foster care youth who age out of the system and then become homeless. So there's about 20,000 foster youth who age out of foster care at 18, and then within 18 months of being emancipated, 40 to 50% of them become homeless. And I have noticed, I don't know if you guys have also noticed this, but I have noticed that there is an increasing number of young people who are on the streets. And that's always pretty concerning and kind of hurts my heart because they're not much younger than I am, and some of them are the same age as me. And to think that they might be in the same place in 20, 30 years is very disheartening, especially if they don't receive services now.
Yeah, we need to help them now before the addiction set in, before the
Right.
trauma sets in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, before I came here, I worked with foster kids over at Child Protective Services.
Hmm.
So, like you said, like that's very hard trauma very early on in age. Um, if the kids are lucky, it happens to them like when they're really young. So by the time they're
Hmm.
older, it's kind of, they don't think about it as much, or it's not a big part of their life. But especially for
Right.
teenagers, like I know it's very hard on them
Right.
having to go through that, just because they understand everything a little bit better, like they're aware of what's going on. They know the system that they're in. They move homes every few months, every few weeks for some of these kids. And then,
Right.
like Kat said, when they age out, they're kind of just thrown out there in the world to kind of survive on their own. And I know there's services, and even us here, we have, the Tay team, which kind of
Hmm.
helps with transitioning them, into adult life and providing for themselves. But like I was saying, I just think we need more emphasis on that, because there is an increasing number of young homeless people, especially here.
Right.
Is there anybody else to help them besides county or government programs? Is there any privatized institutions
I'm
that
sure there
would?
are privatized institutions. I think one of the main issues, though, is everything is we needed these assistance programs and these support teams like more centralized.
Right.
Because I mean, when I worked with the foster kids, I didn't really hear much about current behavioral health. Literally, the only time I would hear about it was when coworkers would transfer over there. But like the actual programs and services that we provide, I never really heard from, whether it be the social workers or like the kids themselves. They would never tell me like, oh, I'm, going to therapy, or, I got this going on. They're helping me with this.
Hmm.
I didn't really hear much about that. So I don't know if it's very, um, if it's kind of like given to them as like options or, assistance, just because they're kind of trying to deal with uh, you know, maybe other issues that they're going through, that kind of gets put in the back of their head. And then by the time they know it, they're, 18, 17, and they're kind of scrambling to figure out a plan, you know.
Yeah. I just saw something really interesting in facts about homelessness. There's there's equity, there's racial equity here because it says in 2018 the U.S. homeless figures were 40% black, 50% white, and 10% mixed. Think about that. So homelessness isn't a racial issue. I don't think it doesn't look like it from that statistic. Ooh, silence.
I mean, I think it comes down to like uh, more class issue, you know, like the wealthy versus the poor. The whole like the rich get richer and the poor stay poor, you know.
Yeah,
And it's kind of it's a cycle and it's a habit that this country has gone into itself into. And like Kat said, a habit is very hard to break.
Well, that
Uh,
would be an interesting question to ask some of the people that we engage with in outreach is, what was your socioeconomic status as a child or even as an early adult? But I mean, when it comes to mental illness, I've engaged with people, they used to be social workers, they used to be nurses, they used to be doctors, they had careers, they owned homes, they've had families, they worked jobs before, and mental illness usually, at least with the severe schizophrenia spectrum, the bipolar disorder spectrum, major depressive disorder, those settle, in the early mid-20s. So for some of these people, when it hits them, and it doesn't really matter what your socioeconomic status is. If it's severe and you don't get treatment, you're going to end up severely mentally ill and could end up on the street. Um,
right.
it's not mental illness is not something that only affects the low income poor, although there is a higher likelihood that it will become severe because there's more stigma when it comes to treatment. But it affects everyone. I've seen, along the economic spectrum, that I think most people would be shocked by the number of homeless people with bachelor's degrees. Um, I definitely am each time. It never doesn't make me shocked, but uh, it affects everyone, and there's a lot, I would say, more than I would have thought if I hadn't come into this field. Educated homeless people who became mentally ill, and that's where they ended up.
We need to bring that up at the next meeting, Kat, because this whole thing is about data. That's what they want.
Yeah.
And believe me, I understand because the more data you have, the
Mm-hmm.
the
The
more
better.
intelligent
Yeah.
way you can attack this problem, and you can
Mm-hmm.
get money because you can say, hey, this is the issue that we have, and here's the data to back us up. But we need
Right.
to bring that up and put that in the screener,
Right.
even the intake. What was your socioeconomic status, or do you have an education? Any of those things that might help us a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Good idea. I knew we brought you on this show for a reason.
Because
So,
I wake up early enough.
yeah. Not on a work day though.
No, I'm late almost every day.
Oh man. Well, Kat, thank you for coming on. We, I, we really appreciate it. It's sometimes it's just Francisco and I barking back and forth at each other, and you know. And while people appreciate it, it's nice to have another person in there with their opinions. We appreciate you coming on.
Right. Thank you guys for having me.
You're welcome. And maybe I wanted to bring you on for the political show, but you weren't into it. So
I have friends on both sides and family on both sides, and I think I would save myself by
okay, it's a self protection issue. Okay, cool.
Self-isolation.
All right, Kat. Thank you for coming on. We'll catch you next time. All right.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.
All right. Later.
Yeah.
Hey, man, that was interesting. I mean, I, I gotta I have a son who is, he chooses to live outside, and I dealt with that. It's a hard issue to deal with, not only for him, I'm sure, but for me as well. Because, you have, as a parent or a friend or a family member, you have a lot of guilt when someone lives outside.
Yeah.
So I dealt with it by, you know what, I love my son. Uh, I'll never stop loving him. And that love created that worry, and that worry created that guilt. But when he talked to me, he said, this is what I'm choosing to do. And I respect that. And I let it go. And I love him. And I talk to him every week. We text back and forth, and I make sure he's safe and happy and healthy. And if that's the case, that's where he needs to be. So there are people like that too.
Yeah, and I just think it's one of those wars or one of those battles that you have to fight on many fronts. Uh, it's not just, oh well, let's prop a bunch of uh, cheap housing and we'll be good.
Yeah.
Like there's the housing issue, there's funding issue, there's fixing the stigma on mental health, and there's just so many fronts that need to get like attacked at the same time that it's very hard. It's like those cartoons where there's a crack and you plug it and then another one pops up, and you try to plug that one, and it's
Yeah.
at the end of the day it's very hard to plug all the cracks. um
Yeah.
but
There's some metaphor for that. So the Dutch boy in the dike trying to stick his fingers in all the holes.
yeah,
It's like sooner
so
or later you run out of fingers, man. You know?
but I mean, I think it's definitely something we can uh achieve at some point in the future. We just kind of have to change our mentality, like overall, this country, this society, of how we treat people. And I mean, if you ask me, like, this could be my inner, like, Karl Marx coming out. But I mean, to me, at the end of the day, it comes down to what Kat was saying earlier about how, for a lot of these people, they're trying to make a profit, and we live in a society where, you know, that's the main thing we're worried about is trying to make a profit and trying to make more and more money. And when you live in a system like that, in a society like that, there's gonna be uh, people that get pushed down to the bottom
Yeah.
instead of trying to live in a society where, I want to, be well off and, financially stable, which I mean, I don't think is a bad thing to want those things. I think everybody wants that. Uh, but I think we should live in a society where we want that for everybody. Um, and, it's once we kind of, flip that switch and try to begin to, like you said, empathize for the people at the bottom. And, when they say like, oh, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, like it's not that easy. You know, the people at the top and the people that have all the power and all the money are either people that, uh, kind of never struggled and were, born into that wealth, or people that, so there are some people that came from the bottom and, made it to the top, but
Yeah.
then they kind of, a lot of them have that mentality like, oh, well, I did it, so can anybody else. And
Yeah, that's the problem. Not
so,
everybody has your luck and your skill, buddy.
right. And then, so, the people at the top, they kind of have the same mentality where like, well, you work for, like I did it, you can do it too, where it's not that easy, it's not that simple. And I mean, even itself, like the saying, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, it was coined the way, like when it was originally coined, it was coined to mock people that think that way, because it's impossible to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Like it's physically impossible. Like you can't pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Like that's not a realistic thing.
And it's morphed into something that's like, hey, be tough.
Yeah. When in reality, it's like that way of thinking is pretty, fucking stupid. And I don't know, man. Like I think just for me personally, the longer I like hear and like learn about this and like read into these things, like it's almost like I can see why people uh, get so frustrated with the way our system works here,
Yep.
because it just feels like we're at a stalemate and like nothing's getting done. And people like to mock like AOC and like Bernie Sanders, like, oh, they're like, they want all these major changes and like they're like radical liberals, and like it's not, what they're proposing isn't radical at all. It's
It's
basic.
kind.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
healthcare, like minimum wage, like all these things. I've read that a big thing about minimum wage is like, oh well, if you good luck raising the minimum wage to 15, and your Big Mac's gonna cost $12. Where that's not true. Like that will not happen.
I
Uh,
know.
there's in Denmark, the average, I saw this this statistic where the average McDonald's employee here in the United States makes like 950, 975 an hour. And a Big Mac here is like 485 or like four something. In Denmark, the average McDonald's worker makes $19 an hour, and most of them make over $20 an hour. And guess what a Big Mac costs over there?
I have
It's
no idea.
it's 5.15. So it went up 35 cents, if that. And they're unionized, and they get overtime pay, and they get paid sick leave. So it's like I said earlier when we were talking to Rob or Robert last time. We have these issues, and I feel like we have all the solutions, and we're still choosing to not implement them. Why? Because a lot of people are greedy. A lot of people want to keep what they have, and they don't want to take that and help the people that need the help.
Yeah. You know what, dude? Doing this podcast with you has really woken me up. I not that I was a full-time capitalist when we started. As a matter of fact, on our first or second one, literally said I hate capitalism, and you were like, "Whoa, wait a minute." So,
Yeah,
but
and we kind of like
but
I completely.
your morphing has forced me further. I'm reading a book right now called "Why Marx Was Right," and I wrote a blog on LinkedIn about it and talk about pushback. Okay. And all I was saying was Marxism is not, it's not that AOC and Bernie want Marxism. Okay. Marxism is simply just a critique of this system that we have. That's all. Marx wasn't saying we need to do this. It was more like you need to stop doing what you're doing. So I'm reading this book called Marx Was Right. We'll talk about it in a podcast when I finish it. But you know what? You have pushed me to the point where I have to agree with you now. This system is so fucking broken, man. When you have 500,000 people living on the street and people working three jobs and still can't afford to feed themselves and put gas in their car, and nobody has health care, what a fuck up that is, man. And if you are one of those people that says, well, capitalism is correct, no, I can't agree with you anymore. Not when so many people suffer under the system.
Exactly. So it's just, I think capitalism is a needed step towards like socialism or like communism. And I think one of the things, it's very much like mental health. Like there's this big stigma that comes with the word socialism or communism. Like when people say communism, like their eyes like, bulge out of their head, and they're like, you know,
Exactly.
trying to be like China or like, communist, like the USSR. When, if you think about it, China is a completely capitalistic country.
Yes.
Uh, they just have like no regulation and pay their workers like 2 cents a day.
Right.
Um,
They have a ruling class that is almost a dictatorship.
yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, we have that just to a lesser degree here. Even the USSR was an oligarchy. It was full of monopolies. That's not communism. If you look up communism and socialism, it's when the workers have ownership of the product of like uh, what is the word or the phrase? Um, the workers have ownership of uh, the means.
Right.
Everything that they make. they're part owners. They get to benefit from, you know, all the profits, not just the people on top. And
Well,
like, if you explain that to people, like, why? I don't get why that's such a bad thing.
right. Uh, You know, Cuba, not communist, more of a dictatorship. But this dictatorship and this oligarchy and this form of capitalism without those countries all have this little tweaks of communism and socialism, like Cuba, where they had a 99% literacy rate, and they attributed that to communism. So when you identify with something and you tell the world, "Hey, we're a communist society," then the world has to go in and look at what you're doing, and we have to decide. And like you said, most of us just say Russia was communist, China was communist, Cuba was communist, you know, Venezuela. We have all these ideas about communism and this brutal way that these dictators and oligarchs treat the people. And then we look at ourselves and we say, well, we're not like that. But to a degree, we are.
Yeah. And I think the United States as a whole, throughout its history, has kind of made a business out of uh, promoting that uh, communism is bad. Like, you don't
Yeah.
want to hear.
Oh, hell yeah. The Red Scare, the 50s.
Yeah, because I mean, the people that have the power to influence, you know, the masses like that are the people at the top, and they know that if things were to change, they would lose a lot of their power. You know,
Yeah.
um, I just think getting spreading and widening that wealth, uh, you know, graph is. I mean, I don't see why that's such a terrible thing.
It's
Um,
not unless you're rich and you have to give away some of your shit.
yeah, and then people, I don't know why people are so hard bent on defending like billionaires. Like, you're not a billionaire. Like, if billionaires want to try to defend themselves, okay, that's one thing. But like normal average, like you make, you know, 40, $50,000 a year. Why are you defending Jeff Bezos and all these, like, you know,
Easy,
fucking
dude. That's
Elon Musk?
easy. Because look at what we do. We have This is idolatry. Okay, this is what our country is based on. Superheroes. Those are our heroes. That's the people I want to be like. Don't run down Superman. Don't run down Jeff Bezos, because someday I could be like that if I find some fucking magic miracle way to do that. You know,
Yeah.
so that's why we defend them, because we want to be like them. We want to emulate them. We want to live like that. We we're sad when we can't get on our private jet that we own and jet over to fucking Paris, you know? That's the lifestyle that we're like, yeah, that's what I want. That's the thing that capitalism gives me if I can find a way to do it. But the situation is you're never going to find a way to do it, and you need to accept that, and that the person that did it needs to give back, needs to be thankful that they're in that position.
Yeah, it's kind of like winning the lottery. Like, is there a
Yeah,
chance? Yeah, but is it going to happen to you? Probably not.
probably not. Probably not. All
It's
right,
just,
man. We are standing at 58 minutes, and like I said, my wife wants to go to Starbucks. So, and I do too. You know, come on, be honest. But so, hey, maybe if I start a Starbucks, I'll get my private jet. Yeah, wait a minute. But I wanted to discuss something. I want to change something. Not the format, but I want to change from Francisco and Robert to Lalo and Bob. And if that's all right with you, I'll do all that stuff over the next few weeks. The changeover will be kind of hard, but I identify with Bob or Bobby more than I identify with Robert. And the reason that I went with Robert at our work was, for a
it's
period of time,
your
I went to therapy, and I found my path to to get out of anxiety and get out of OCD and get this podcast and everything and get a job. And to me, Robert was more businesslike, and but I'm not that way, dude. um, I don't mind being called Robert, but I don't identify with it.
Hmm.
So I was raised by my grandparents, and I've been Bob and Bobby all my life, and I changed it in the last 2 years, and that's really strange. I know to hear because everybody in the life that I have built now knows me as Robert, but I'm here to tell you that's fucking over. Okay. So my name is Bob, and I want to go with Lalo and Bob, but we need to find out where Lalo came from because that's not a name.
See, well, I mean, it is a name, first of all.
Is it?
Um, well, for me, the thing is, kind of like you, I've always identified with both names just because in school or in any like work setting that I was in, like Francisco is my, government legal name.
Yeah.
So that's what I was always called in school. But growing up in my family, they would always call me Lalo because it's one of those things like how there's like William and Bill
Uh-huh.
and like Richard and Dick, stuff like that.
Yeah. Bob
So,
and Robert.
yeah. So for me, my middle name is Eduardo, and in Mexico, like Mexican culture, Lalo is like the shortened, like or like
Oh, so it is a name.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'd never heard it before I met you. And then when somebody called you Lalo,
that's
and
probably Ralph when he came.
yeah, Ralph. And then I picked it up because it sounded more comfortable and more familiar.
Yeah. So, like with that name, that's how I've grown up, like with my family, and then like my close friends. Like that's just what they've always called me. Like my siblings, like Francisco. That name never gets said like in my household when they're. Um, but I
I
mean,
know.
I don't really mind either one. I identify with both just because I kind of get half at home and then half outside of home at work. Wherever I go anywhere.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's where it comes from. It's kind of weird because I don't really get how you get Lalo from Eduardo.
Well, I don't know how you get Dick from Richard, so whatever.
I think I think a lot of those names, to be honest, comes from the way babies try to say names, and it kind of comes out all weird,
Yeah.
and so they like kind of they adopted that and stuck like ran with it. But yeah, that's where Lalo comes from. There's a lot of like just like in English, there's a lot of names that have that. Like Francisco, um, I don't know if you've noticed at work, a lot of people call me Pancho
Yeah.
because that's like the same thing with Francisco. Um,
And
so
one
it's
person calls you Armando or something. I
because they forget my name, but it's okay.
don't.
I don't take it really personal. I don't. I try not to take myself so serious, but
Uh,
uh,
yeah, thanks. I don't either anymore. That's how why I'm trying to drop Robert. It's like God, that just sounds so like I don't know, professional. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that with my life.
but yeah, that's where that comes from. So, I mean, like I said, I identify with both either way, so it doesn't really matter. Like if people come on here and they call me Francisco, that's fine.
All right. All right. Well, I'm gonna change it if it's all right with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. It's the Lalo and Bob show. That just sounds better to me. It's
More,
like,
what's the word? Like informal, appealing,
yeah,
more
there
like
you go.
casual.
More like our podcast, which are like completely unedited, just raw, like, fuck this, fuck that, whatever. All right, dude. I appreciate you, man. We're gonna wrap this one up. Lots of good information in this one. Serious topic, something that need to be talked about. I think tomorrow we're supposed to have Robert back on, and he said, "What's the topic?" And I said, "Well, Mitch McConnell is a pussy, and Ted Cruz is an asshole. Whatever."
Oh my god, that Cruz, something else, man.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that this weekend, man.
That guy, he's like, I don't know. I'll save it till tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
But I want before we wrap it up, just another thanks to Kat for coming on. I feel like she's very, from what I see, her like from what she said today and from what I see at work, she's very like passionate about,
Yeah.
this, and she's very invested and she really does care.
Yeah, that girl has a heart, man.
So I feel like
That's cool.
her input and her opinions are very, very much appreciated here.
You know, she is first one out of the van, first one to pull up, the first one to point people out. She's a beautiful soul, and I do appreciate working with her. And we've had we've had some weird fucking occurrences in the field together for when we were in the field before the pandemic. So yeah, you're right. Thank you, Kat, for coming on. I appreciate it. Anything else you got, man?
No, at least I'll save the rest for tomorrow.
All right, cool.
Look more, I don't know.
Inflammatory?
Yeah, but that's the word.
Cool. All right, so this Saturday morning, we're going to wrap it up. This is Bob.
And Lalo.
Yeah, and this is a Thoroughly Wrong project. And please, tune in tomorrow because we're going to roast Ted Cruz like a fucking duck. See you tomorrow, man.
Later, man.
Later. You have now experienced the Thoroughly Wrong Project with your podcast hosts, Lalo and Bob. We can now be found on Pandora Radio, Apple Podcasts, Podium Podcast, or by searching the Thoroughly Wrong Project to locate our YouTube channel. You can contact us directly by email at thoroughly-wrong@gmail.com or just leave a comment on any of our platforms. Until next time, thanks for spending your valuable time with us, and remember, always speak up and never be afraid to be thoroughly wrong.